Does my executor or personal representative have to be a U.S. citizen? My name is Andrew Ayers. I'm an estate planning and business law attorney with offices in Edina, Minnesota, and New York City. Today, let's take a look at a common question I get, especially if you have family members who are not U.S. citizens, and whether they can serve as your personal representative or your executor. So let's first start with a little bit of a definition. What is a personal representative or an executor? A personal representative or an executor, the name will depend upon what your state laws say, but the two most common terms we hear are personal representative and executor. That person's role is to take whatever assets are in your estate at the time of your death and distribute them where they need to go. So if you have created a will, this person is going to be designated in your will. We're going to choose somebody to be that person. If you don't have a will, then that role is going to have to be appointed by a court. And if you have various siblings, for example, the court's going to have to decide who is the most suitable person to be your executor or personal representative. So one of the main benefits we have using a will is that we choose who is going to be the personal representative, so you can make sure it's your sister and not your brother who's gone bankrupt 5 times who's in charge of distributing your assets. And you'll be more than just one. You usually want to appoint 2 to 3 so that if the first person is unavailable, somebody else can step in to be the personal representative or the executor. The reasons it's important is if we don't have anybody, we then have to involve the courts, and it can take time, it can be expensive, and if your family isn't sure what to do, they're now paying lawyers to sort out who should be the personal representative for your estate. So the first step you need to do is make sure when you create your estate plan, we want to choose the right person to be your personal representative or your executor. We don't want to leave it to chance. You should also know that if you've created a trust, your trustee is not automatically your executor or personal representative. So your trust is a different document from your will, and that's a different role of a trustee versus a personal representative. So don't just assume that that will be the person who's appointed. And again, if we have one person who's a trustee, it's your brother, and the other one, if the trustee is your brother, your personal representative is your sister, and they're not getting along, then you've just created a bunch of fights after you're gone. So assuming we don't have to worry about all that, now we know what a personal representative is, what an executor is, let's look at who can actually be this personal representative. So the common question I get is, does that person have to be a U.S. citizen? And actually, even on a smaller level, a lot of times it's, do they have to even live in the state where I'm living? So the simple answer is, unless you're in Florida, your personal representative, your executor, does not have to be a U.S. citizen. It can be somebody who's located abroad. They don't have to reside in the state where you're living. They don't have to be even in the country. But what we have to remember is they're going to have a lot of work to do to deal with the court, to submit a will, submit a death certificate. So you want somebody who you think can be comfortable with the local laws, the rules, and the regulations of your probate court. So you can absolutely choose somebody in a foreign country. These days it's easy to do a lot of banking online. We can do a lot of even court appearances virtually. So they don't necessarily have to travel to the United States to be able to be the executor or the personal representative, but it's easier if they are. And if they're here, it's easier just to travel within the United States. Let's say you're going from California up to Oregon. That's a lot easier. But they do not have to be a resident of the state you live in, and they don't have to be a citizen of the United States. They just have to be ready to perform the duties that your local probate court requires of that personal representative or that executor. So you want to make sure they can follow those and that they're comfortable doing it, and that you've got someone who's responsible and good with paperwork, because there's going to be a lot of paperwork involved once they have to start dealing with your estate, unless, of course, you've created a trust or you've got the right estate planning documents in place that either eliminate or significantly reduce the need for paperwork. So that's a simple answer to a relatively common question I get. So it's preferable to have somebody local. They don't necessarily have to be a U.S. citizen, but it's important to know the rules of your local probate court so you know what they're going to be asked to do. If you have more questions or you're having trouble deciding who's going to be the personal representative or the executor for your estate, we can set up a legal strategy session. You can go to my website, andrewmayers.com. There's a red Legal Strategy Session button on the front page. If you click that, you'll be taken to my calendar where we can set up a convenient time for us to have a 15 or 20-minute phone call to discuss the roles of the personal representative or executor and what those next steps should be for you and your estate plan. If you like this video, you can hit the like or the thumbs up button below. You can subscribe on YouTube or go to 𝙃𝙊𝙇𝙊𝙒.com. And when you're picking that personal representative, make sure you think about who's the best person to serve, and that should consider about how local they are to you and how easy it will be for them to work with your local court.